I would say that give healing precedence, but also give life precedence because healing is an ongoing journey till the day that you die. And one of the ways to leave the past behind is to give the future or evolution a chance.
Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Woo Curious podcast, your map to the mystical, your key to the sacred, and your guide back home to yourself. I'm Eileen, a writer, a spiritual coach, energy healer, and slow living witch. This podcast is your invitation to explore a world where the mundane and the sacred intertwine. It's a haven for those ready to take the first steps into the realms of magic and mystery, providing a safe space for you to embark on your own enchanted journey towards healing and self-discovery. Here, I'll unveil the whispers of the mystical, the rituals often hidden in plain sight, and I'll engage in sacred conversation intended to stir your soul and lead you back into your power. I'm all about demystifying woo and witchcraft. So, whether you're a seasoned seeker or simply woo curious, I'm so delighted you've decided to join me on this journey. Let's make magic. Before we begin today's episode, I'd like to share some words with you from a Wheel of the Year participant. Stephanie writes, "Honoring the changing of the seasons with Eileen is one of my favorite rituals. The space she creates is sacred and deeply rooted in honoring the earth and the women gathered. She makes space for us to witness all that has transpired, good and bad. She calls out our highest vision and walks us through clearing the space we need to see our biggest dreams come true, one season at a time. Setting aside the time to sit in these circles is truly a gift to yourself. I can't wait for the next one." A gift to yourself. I love that framing because it's genuinely what these ceremonies are intended to be. 8 times a year, I open a circle for women to gather and mark the turning of the wheel. Imbolc, Bealtaine, Lunasa, Samhain, the solstices and the equinoxes. Each ceremony is a chance to pause, to reflect on what the season is asking of you, to release what no longer serves, and to vision forward with intention and support. You don't need any experience. You don't need to know anything about Celtic traditions or the Wheel of the Year itself. You just need to be willing to give yourself the gift of presence and to arrive with curiosity. Upcoming ceremony details are at myluminous-life.ca/wheel-of-the-year-ceremonies, and I truly hope to see you at the next one. Hello, Woo Crew, and welcome back to another episode of the Woo Curious podcast. I am your host, Eileen, and I'm excited to be joined today by a delightful guest. I can't wait to get into her story. Dr. Meher Chahal is the author of Unlicensed Medicine and a teacher who helps people understand and heal inherited trauma. As a former psychiatry resident who walked away from Western medicine, she offers a rare perspective integrating family constellations, somatic work, and shadow work to reach the root of patterns traditional therapy can't touch. Dr. Chahal's journey began with her mother's schizophrenia and a shocking murder by her maternal ancestor that reached India's Supreme Court. As a psychiatry resident, she realized the system was designed to manage symptoms, not to heal, prompting her to leave medicine and confront the ancestral shadows she'd unknowingly carried. Through this journey, Dr. Chahal developed a framework of psychological alchemy she calls unlicensed medicine, transmuting the heaviest parts of your story into your greatest power. She shares her healing journey not as a guru, but as someone offering her experience as a possible elixir for others. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. There's so many pieces of your story that I'm really curious to dive into. And I want to start where I always start with my guests, which is asking a little bit about your own journey with spirituality in life and how it informs the work that you do today.
Yeah, my journey with spirituality, when I retrospectively look back, started right coinciding with my Saturn return. Retrospectively, I was not at all into astrology because I really had my doctor brain, Western medicine
Right.
brain on. Actually, the last chapter of my book is on a psychological astrology, and I go into this further, but like I basically talk about how my grandmother used to take me for all these Vedic remedies for her kids along, and we would be like donating these random things. And I used to, like, my science brain was like, this is like really a bunch of baloney. And then the more that I started like getting into it, one of my professional aspects is I'm a professional astrologer. So now it's so wild how life transforms you, and especially the things which you say absolutely not to, you end up becoming, talking about even shadow work. So retrospectively, it coincides with that time. It's about almost 3 years now, I would say, where I would consider my spiritual awakening. I grew up more religious. I'm Punjabi, so Sikhism is my religion. So I grew up religious. It was always a source of strength in a difficult time, or, just a source of faith. And then when I came from India for my psychiatry residency to Brooklyn, to the States, that entire time coincided with me shifting more from religiousness to more spirituality and incorporating
Right.
it. To be very honest, Sikhism is a more modern religion, so it does have a lot of spiritual views too. And that's really when I think I started questioning, like, wow, there's something like fate, and there's something like consciousness just beyond like what you can see. And then just a series of like events and synchronicities happened, which further strengthened my belief in spirituality. And yeah, here we are.
Here we are. Yeah. I always love hearing people's stories because there's always these threads that are so similar. I had a guest on this morning that I was recording with, and she was also talking about her Saturn return and how impactful that moment in life is for so many of us.
It really is like it like
Yeah.
pulled the rug under my feet. Like I did not see that coming.
Yeah. Yeah. The other piece that I love in your story too is that going from that place of being like, this is all kind of, baloney, as you said, made up, like, what are we doing? This is woo. That's such a huge part of my story as well. I was a midwife prior to embarking on this journey. And so there's room for midwives to be a little bit more esoteric, I think, but I was not. I came into it. I was scientific, cold hard facts, rigorous scientific procedures, evidence-based everything. And it was a real awakening for me. It was later than my Saturn return, but that sudden discovery that there was in fact more, and that things beyond the realm of our scientific method made sense. And it's, yeah, that led me to now I am a witch, and I
I
do
love
energy
that.
healing
I
work.
love that. I mean, yeah, I mean, which basically just meant
Yes.
wise woman in
Yeah.
um olden traditions. So, but we're obviously taught
To fear
not the
it.
most positive connotations of that word.
No, I know it got very co-opted and is now, yeah, it means evil or bad, but it's not what it means. It's fun to see where our lives lead us when especially when we feel like we've been one way for so much of our lives. And then it's like all of a sudden a door opens that you didn't even know existed. And now you're on this other path.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
I recently read this quote, and I keep telling people this, where it's like, when you're little and then you think of your like life as, at 30 I'll be like that, at 40 I'll be like that, this thing. And it's like, wow, I could not believe in my wildest dream that I would be like this. And secondly, you know it's like when you plan, God laughs. I really like resonate with that. When you like really over plan like every part of your life, it's like God is like laughing. So like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious because you moved to the States and you went to school and you were training to become a psychiatrist. And some point on that journey, you realized that you couldn't keep going in that line of work. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that part of your journey and what prompted that shift.
Yeah, I think it was so multifactorial. I think my intuition had been nudging me for, I would say, more than like 6, 7 months, that I was like, first of all, I think it was very different from what I had in my head of, I think, the very Freudian or Jungian, this thing of like, okay, your patient kind of lies down on the couch and you kind of like listen to them. So I thought it's going to be very old school and traditional. Turns out it really wasn't. There were just so many different facets of superficiality where we were not even coming close to the root, and it was just like a bandage about like another diagnosis, or just like more medication, and very by the book. So a lot of it I didn't resonate with. Then I think that especially the children part was something which really I did not feel in integrity with, because I was like, this
Right.
is not okay. These kids they're not even adults, they're not even 18 plus, and we're already like labeling them with such heavy diagnoses and giving them, different medications, and their life has not even started yet. So that was also one of the other parts. And then I started to physically become sick, and has started having like solar plexus issues, which is, for those who know what that is about, it was really living life out of alignment. And I actually developed a gastric pre-ulcer. And it was really like, I think my mental health was obviously affected, but when my physical effect started getting this thing, I was like, no, this is my body saying no.
Yeah.
It's like when you don't say no, your body will say it for you. So it was kind of like that.
True.
So many like alarm bells that I
Right.
kept ignoring. And then the voice just keeps getting louder, and the external events keep getting louder.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's such a powerful story because I think so many of us have experienced that. It's like our body is always whispering. The intuition is there, the little nudges, but eventually, if we're not listening, our body gets very loud. And hopefully, we're lucky enough to be able to listen to it when it gets loud before permanent damage is done, or, real lasting damage.
Yeah, yeah, talking about permanent this thing, I think that was kind of my foresight, because I was like, okay, at this age, if it's this, 10 years later, it's going to be something like cancer, or something
Yeah.
like way worse. And
Yeah.
I I can't do that. I can't be a martyr for a vocation.
Yeah, there's so much resonance for me as you talk about that kind of medicalized mental health space. There's a part of the reason that I left midwifery. I often joke that when the apocalypse comes, I'll be a midwife again, no problem. But it's the medicalization of birth and the legal, like the risk of lawsuit if you happen to say something that isn't the standard of care, but you know to be a good course of action, but then something happens and you're on the hook. And it's just that, like, fitting into that medical legal
Yeah.
box was so hard on my heart.
Yeah, you're so right. Because, even when you want to go the extra mile for your patient, it's like you have all of these like laws and boxes and like medical legal stuff, and you can't help even more, even if you wanted to, because you don't want a lawsuit. So
Exactly. Yeah, and it's such a hard place because obviously we need frameworks to protect people from malpractice, but then so often we go too far and we make it so that we can't actually even help people. I'm I'm really curious. So you made the decision to leave, to be done with that route. What happened next? What did you jump straight into the work you're doing now, or yeah, what when you leave a program like that and a trajectory, it can be really like setting foot on an unknown journey.
it's still, because it hasn't even been 2 years, so it still feels kind of like the unknown journey. Um,
Right.
but when I started becoming more spiritual and the synchronicity part of it, I would keep hearing from people, it's from spiritual mentors, like, have you heard of like family constellations? Have you heard of
Oh
family
yeah.
constellations? When I would kind of like, open up about my story. And I kept hearing that as a synchronicity two, three times. And then really when I, like, I think a month or something before I left residency, that's really when I was nudged and pushed into this. And then I just like, Googled family constellations, and there was this South Indian woman living just 10 minutes away from me in Brooklyn. And
Oh, cool.
she was also an ex-pharmacist, of course. So,
Yes, of course. Yeah.
so that's, I think I was kind of nudged by the universe and I followed the breadcrumbs.
Yeah.
I was forced to follow them.
Right.
And yeah, that's how I got in firstly on the side of receiving it, and then was really like, oh my god, this is mind blowing, like I really want to learn
Yeah.
this.
Oh, that's yeah, it's so perfect how it almost always happens that there's just like when we're ready and we move, the universe lines up those pieces for us to move into. I know a little bit about family constellations, but I've never had anyone on the show who is an expert at them or has talked about them. So I would love if you would share like what is family constellations, because I'm sure there's listeners who don't have a clue what we're talking about.
So family and systemic constellations is therapy or a healing modality which is based primarily on ancestral healing and epigenetics. And it's basically talks about how we all are connected through a common field, which is based on quantum physics of morphic resonance of, when something happens to somebody, that ripple effect ripples into the coming generations, or all of us, we're connected in
Right.
a certain way. So that is kind of one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is that when your grandmother was pregnant with your mom, in your mom's ovaries, you were a cell, right? So, whatever trauma or stress your grandma experienced, you experienced it firsthand. So, it's not even inherited, it's firsthand trauma. So, that is kind of the more epigenetic scientific side of it. And what Constellation helps with is it really, more than 90% of our trauma is actually inherited. It helps you release those entanglements, burdens, karmic debts, whatever you want to call them, stressors which don't belong to you, and kind of like return them and leave them behind and choose a different fate and direction for yourself, but with the
Right.
blessing of your ancestors. So, I think there's a very thin line in. I see this often in the spiritual community where it's like, oh my God, I'm the cycle breaker, and I'm the one who's doing all of this. It's also because of your ancestors and their sacrifices that you got to the place where you are to have the tools that you have. So there is a way to do it with like respect, to return the not so great parts, or which are not pro evolution or you don't need anymore, and kind of take the good parts, which is resilience or ancestral gifts. So I think there's a very thin line in this, and this work has to be done with a lot of humility and not from a place of like, I'm so much better because I have more consciousness.
Yeah, yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because it's echoes so much of what what we talk about and share here is that relationship is such a foundation of all of the work. And if you're working with ancestors, there's relationship there, and they were human beings, or they were living beings, and we don't want to just, I mean, shit all over them, for lack of a
Yeah,
more
yeah,
eloquent way of saying
yeah,
that,
yeah,
and deny all the gifts that they've given us and the privilege that we have of being able to, as you said, take their knowledge and take what they sacrificed to be able to be here and to be able to be in a position where we get to heal, because we're not healing just for ourselves, we're healing
for
for our
sure,
whole lineage.
for sure.
Yeah. The little bit of family constellations work that I've experienced involved multiple people in a room, and like intuitively moving around. Is that the process always?
Yes, multiple people, I personally feel like is the most effective because nothing is more powerful than actually human souls coming together and doing a workshop and acting as you must have experienced as different members.
Yeah.
However, there is another way, which is like by objects. If it's just a one on one session and you don't have other
Mm-hmm.
people, then you can use objects to represent people. But I
Right.
have personally found that it's just so amazing when we all come together and we realize how interconnected we are. And the field, like I was talking about the morphic resonance field or the family constellation field, it always brings together people on the workshop which have a similar kind of like resonance or traumatic imprint, and it's
Right.
so fascinating that you pick people who represent very similar
Mm-hmm.
patterns.
Yeah, yeah, it was a very fascinating process to be part of. I had no idea what I was walking into when I went. I just had a trusted colleague and friend, and her friend was training in this, and so she was looking for people to come together so her colleague could train and practice. And so I had no idea what I was getting in for, and I just remember as we started to act out or feel into different people, the way that like emotion or feeling or behavior would come over me as I fell into the roles of that person's family, sometimes, mother or a sister, and like behaviors that I went and sat and faced the wall at one point, and I was like, this is weird. Like, what am I
Yeah,
doing?
yeah.
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
it
It's
is
really,
it's so fascinating. And till date I find it so difficult to explain to people when they ask me like what it is and what happens, because it sounds so woo woo to just be like, you just like channel and you're like, I wouldn't even use the word pretending, but you're somehow able to take on their consciousness and act like that. It's not even acting, it's so difficult to explain it. So the best way I do it is I tell them to watch the show Another Self on Netflix.
oh,
It's a Turkish show. Because
okay.
so I made my aunt also watch it, and I also want my cousins to see it because it's so difficult to explain it, and they really do a really good job. And the interesting part is even the main facilitator in the show, he was also an ex-psychiatrist, and he left that and he became a practitioner. So I'm like, just watch the show, you'll get a sense of what's happening.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it really is. It's like that channeled embodiment of another being. And they
Yeah,
may not even be here anymore, but it's like embodying their energetic pattern or something. It's,
yeah,
yeah, very, very interesting. I'm not surprised you have a hard time describing it. I was like, I wonder how you would describe it. It's no
yeah,
wonder.
yeah. It is.
Yeah.
It's You have to experience it to just believe it.
This is all very fascinating. I was just peeking over like kind of some of the topics that when we were chatting about you coming onto the show, you put forward as things you like to talk about. And we're already talking about a lot of them. But one of them that I really want to make sure we touch on is this: why you should never gaslight yourself with, but I grew up privileged. Because I think that's going to resonate for, I'm going out on a limb, but I'm pretty sure most of my listeners are kind of in my age bracket. They're in Canada or the States, they're in a certain wealth bracket. And, we've all had hardships in our lives, but for the most part, I think most of my listeners would say we grew up pretty privileged. And I think that comes up a lot when we're delving into spirituality and healing work. So I love to hear your
Y-
take on that.
Yeah, I think that still to date is like the most challenging aspect of healing personally for me, because we live in a world where there's already this like pre-notion of be grateful for what you have, somebody else has it like worse than you. And I'm not sure if you've heard of Pete Walker.
I don't think so.
So he's done amazing work in like complex PTSD and complex trauma, and he basically speaks to the fact of how limiting and actually negative the effect of premature gratitude is on people who've actually experienced a lot of complex trauma, because they really need to grieve what happened and or what didn't happen to be able to even reach to a stage of that. So when you already give them a to-do list of like, now you have to also be grateful, there becomes a sense of like self gaslighting. um
Yeah.
and I think, just in general, I think when people hear the word trauma, they associate it with war, and then they, associate it with like really like big stuff. However, I would say that most of the people that I know, which is really fascinating, whether it's in America, you meet people from so many different cultures. Some of your ancestor has been to war. One of your ancestor has been to
Oh,
war,
for
and it
sure.
didn't finish with that ancestor just like passing away. So there is a ripple effect even of something as big as that in you. Secondly, I would say, I, again, I'm privileged enough to say that I haven't experienced the poverty aspect of not having basic needs met, which I am very grateful about. However, from whoever I hear, beyond a certain amount and point, when your needs are met or you are able to do whatever you want to do, there's not a much difference in lifestyle between two people in that kind of wealthy bracket. And that's why people who are really up there or very wealthy, you'll see that they suffer from so many like mental illnesses, and they feel really empty inside or like purposeless inside. So I think it's not so simple as being like you grew up privileged, so you don't have the privilege to have trauma. And I think this is just a collective narrative about it. And there's also a very generational impact of this because, you know, if you came from a family where your parents didn't have anything, but they worked really hard and, they got to a certain social status, then that becomes even an extra layer of, you guys had everything and we didn't have anything. So
You should be
there's
so
this an
grateful.
extra like layer of guilt, um, and which again becomes this like chronic form of invalidation,
Yeah.
which is really hard.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that word in, that invalidation and that chronic invalidation. It doesn't, yes, some of us have had big traumas, but there are little ways in which harm is caused. We don't even need to use the word trauma to know that we didn't all get the love we needed when we needed it. We didn't all get, there's little events that from the outside seem trivial, but especially when we're young, were really big moments for us. And and then we're told you should be grateful, you have nothing to complain about. That's kind of reinforcing that harm, almost re-traumatizing, because then as you say, like, we gaslight ourselves, like, oh, I shouldn't feel this badly, but we
Yeah.
do. And so it's a huge piece of being able to validate, like, your emotions, your trauma, or your hardships, they don't make anybody else's any less, but what they do is they give you the ability to step into some healing of that space.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think this is a very intellectual concept, but the antidote of shame is self compassion, which is very hard, personally, even for me till date. And it's very difficult to genuinely be compassionate for other people if you can't have compassion for your own experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big piece, and it's something I think that all those of us in the healing world, the tending and caring world, I think if you're in this space, it's something that we are all working with all the time, right? We're aware of it, we're cultivating self-compassion in ourselves, but that's another piece that we often look to, the guides or the healers, and we're like, well, they've got it figured out, what's wrong with me? And it's like, no, actually, they're probably the ones who are just the most aware of where they still fall into judgment and gaslighting and how those patterns are showing up in their lives, so that they can then be kind of like that guiding light,
Yeah.
one step ahead of the rest of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And, having awareness of your trauma is not the same as having compassion for the actual effect of it. So I think those are two different,
Yeah.
very different things.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. For sure, they are. They are. We can see something and still judge ourselves for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What led you to decide to write your book? I want to bring us around to your book a little bit here because I think it's a beautiful kind of touch point to
I think
move
I
towards.
always kind of knew that I wanted to write a book about like my unique life story and journey. And then when I came across like Constellations, I really was like, why is this not more mainstream? And why do more
Mm,
people not know about this when it is so? Because for me, in my eyes, I find it the perfect amalgamation between science and spirituality. Because, one
mm,
of my therapists used to always say this, Meher, life is not or, it's and. You need both. It's not that
mm-hmm.
you're at war with each other. So for me, it's like the perfect harmony between science and spirituality. So I really wanted to talk about the tools which helped me in my healing journey, and family constellations being very central to that, and also kind of teaching a bit and
Mm-hmm.
expanding consciousness and awareness around it. And because I think when we listen to trauma, I think it's very much like, oh, I behaved this certain way because XYZ happened in my childhood. But I really
Mm-hmm.
want to expand that like lens so much further, that it's so much deeper and vast than what you thought, and it goes so way back.
Yeah, all of these things. I was just teaching yesterday about the witch wound, which is another one of the ways that some of these patterns can be understood, I think is a good way to say it. And it's so obvious when we start to dig into harms and behaviors and patterns that yes, they're impacted by what we experienced in this life. But they are always so much deeper because not only are they epigenetic and ancestral, but then they're also cultural, right? Because those harms and those traumas that happened to our ancestors got encoded into society and culture and the way that things get perpetuated. And so it seems like such a beautiful tool to be able to kind of hold so much more complexity.
Yeah.
And yet it's so simple and subtle, which is, I think, what I loved about the experience of going through some of the family constellation work was like, this is wildly powerful. And like, we're not really doing much.
I know. Yeah, and there's not even much awareness in people about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Where can people find your book? Is it kind of all places books are sold or
Yeah, it's on Amazon, it's on Kindle. The audio version of it is going to be on Audible soon in March. It's
amazing?
in Barnes and Noble, so it's in a lot of places.
Lovely. And unlicensed medicine is the name. Of course, there will be links for that for anybody curious to pick it up in the show notes. Is there other ways that you want to ask people to reach out and connect with you if they're listening, if they're like, I want to know more, I want to connect with Meher, I want to see what this work
Via,
she's offering
I
is?
I think just via my email, I'm happy to connect and just hear people's experiences or answer any questions.
Okay, perfect. And that will of course be below in the show notes as well. Any any last words of wisdom, anything that wants to come through, anything you want to share with listeners before we wrap up?
I would say that give healing precedence, but also give life precedence, because healing is an ongoing journey till the day that you die. And one of the ways to leave the past behind is to give the future or evolution a chance.
Beautiful. Oh, I love that. That's such an important reminder. It can be so easy to get swept up in the healing work and forget
Yeah.
to live. Yeah. Thank you so much for being my guest today. This was a really lovely conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I really, really enjoyed myself.
Lovely. And for everybody listening, definitely make sure you go out and get a copy of Dr. Chahal's book, reach out to her on her email if you're interested in learning more or maybe connecting with her for some support. And of course, if you like this episode, rate, review, like, subscribe, comment, all the things depending on whichever platform you're listening on. And as always, please share it with a friend. I will be back here with you same time next week. Bye for now.